crisis is required. We need to have, because democracies move only when there is a crisis. Like just like Europe, India, very similar. So you are having now crisis, so I hope a lot of positives will happen. In the US, crisis is there, a lot of things are happening. And India also, still we haven't reached the crisis proportion. So that's why I don't think we'll kind of move very fast on this part. But once, then 91, when we had a crisis, then we did a lot of reforms. Now I'm waiting that next we should have another crisis very soon. Then a lot of things will start moving, because then economics starts kind of taking the precedence over the small petty political issues, short-term issues and all. And that's where I think things start to happen. Because then you have a crisis, you have to solve the problem. And then you start looking at the economic aspects. Mercedes example, railway example. And this is another interesting there's an organization called International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics. It's in short ICRISAT, which has again been experimenting with the ethanol, which is basically a substitute for petrol, the motor spirit. And they have come out with an interesting sweet sorghum, which is basically can be used as a feed, food, fodder, and also fuel. And that interesting thing, they again have done the comparisons with sugarcane and maize, and they find this is the cheapest source of getting the ethanol to be useful compared to say sugarcane, which is very, very expensive, opportunity cost is very high, and even maize, which is what the US and all use for producing ethanol. And even Brazil does. So Brazil has a lot of land, so they are able to whatever do it. But again, India and other countries of the world do not have so much land, they can just give it away so easily. And these are some of the interesting other features of this crop. It's a shorter duration period. Dry-land crop doesn't require too much water, greater resilience to abiotic stresses, farmer friendly, meets fodder requirement. Because after you have kind of extracted the juices, the leftover is actually used for feeding the animals. So that's also another positive in this particular crop. And it's eco-friendly, superior quality, less sulfur, high octane, automobile friendly up to 25%. And byproduct, higher biological value, rich in micronutrients, can be used as a feed or for power co-generation also. And earnings, you can see the earnings also. Sweet sorghum and grain sorghum, which is purely food crop. This is a competition. Again, the realization is much higher in this particular crop.
Is this possible to be grown only in India, or what kind of climate?
Basically, the idea is this crop doesn't require too much water. So if you see the previous slide, the water requirement is only 4,000 meter cube compared to 26,000 and 8,000 for the other crops. The main problem is water.
For irrigation. And this is
the water requirement of the crop. And then season, it requires only 4 months to grow. Whereas sugarcane requires entire year, and maize also requires only 4 months. It's a very quick crop. You can actually get in a year 3 crops.
What kind of temperature it needs in order to enable the plant to grow?
It is done in a very hot climate in India, in Madhya Pradesh, where the water is not available. It's a very hot climate, very dry, hot. Basically, this particular organization, if you read the name, will tell you they're actually doing semi-arid. This organization entirely for that purpose. It's a research organization, and you can just go to the net, you get all the information and just taken out some very basic information. The one problem which I read about this crop is that it dries up very fast. So when the output is ready, the crop is ready, you have to use up very quickly. So that's one constraint in this particular crop they are encountering, because how do you store it? But again, if you just leave it,
they are telling is about 45 degrees, is that right?
In Madhya Pradesh, approximately 44.
No, Madhya Pradesh 45, but I think this may be, because this is 4 months crop, but the water requirement is very low. That is the basic advantage of this crop.
But in South India, summers only. 45 million.
But so far it has been tried only in the one region, which is basically, and Andhra Pradesh also they are trying now experiment. If you go to the website, you get a lot more details. I have not really updated, but this is one option. Again, you can see there are a lot of options, but the thing is which one will finally succeed is only over time we'll get to know. Or maybe we have to have a combination of many crops.
And the yield is also dependent on the soil as well as the climate.
Yeah, but here this is really an arid crop, so you don't require too much of this soil issues and all. That's the basic advantage of this particular crop.
And this company provides the seeds for this?
Yeah, they provide. They have a lot of the farmers' really incomes have gone up significantly, This is not a company, actually this is a research organization which is done by UN and Indian government together and set up, it's an independent research organization. And they have a lot of research papers and all, which maybe, if you go to their website, icrisat.org, you will be able to get a lot more information. I mean, I did a couple of papers on biofuels. That time, I had to really look at all these options and all. And this one sounded very promising. That's why I just thought maybe some of you maybe kind of find it some new interesting idea. That's why I just thought put it here.
ADB has come out with a report last year.
Huh?
ADB, Asian Development Bank, saying that sweet sorghum is not suited for India.
For the Indians?
Indian market. Last January, there's a report.
No, I think you see, India is a very big country. So when you say India is not suitable, are you saying entire India or some parts of India?
They have analyzed different pros and cons, and one of the major issues they have spoken about is the seeds. The high variety seeds are not available.
No, that's why ICRISAT is doing research on that basically. So they have done some pilots and they have been very, very encouraging. But again, more work has, I mean, they're doing a lot of work. It's almost for 10 years they are on it. And there have been some initial successes, but again, can you kind of scale it up? That's the issue which I think they must be struggling with. And then the Gujarat part which I have been talking about, Gujarat Solar Park, which has basically recently come up just about 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks, sorry, 19th, 4th, it's about a month back. And that's basically the picture is here. This is a picture of the solar plant, which is about 200 megawatts. And it is on the photovoltaic, being the largest in Asia. It's bigger than the Chinese one, which is about 200 megawatts. Walmart solar park in China. So you find that we are at least in limited way trying to outsmart China, but not in a macro context, but some micro stories are there. And it is expected to touch 900 megawatts in the entire period, and Gujarat alone has planned by end of this year that they will have a total capacity of 968 megawatts of solar power. And you may be having better information than me, but this is what I just found out in the newspapers and all. So the basically low diesel prices actually are one of the important distortions, which actually is raising the basically losses of the oil companies, increasing the government deficit, and ultimately leading to a lot of the if you look at this year's sales of the cars, 53% of the car sales is diesel cars. What people are doing is they've stopped buying petrol cars. They just don't want to buy a petrol car because petrol price is almost twice that of a diesel price. And on top of that, diesel car normally is more fuel efficient. It gives you better mileage than the petrol car. And third, obviously negative point is the pollution. The diesel cars normally tend to be more polluting. But again, government is right now contemplating that they should put some extra tax on the diesel cars. So that, because the thing is, why do we subsidize diesel? The basic reason is that the public transportation, your buses, railways, trucks, all of them basically run on diesel. So if you increase the diesel price, your inflation is going to be out of control, because already inflation is about 10 to 11%. The moment you increase diesel prices, obviously you can guess what will happen to this government in the next elections. So obviously it should not be any surprise that the Indian government is reluctant to raise the diesel prices. But what is the negative fallout of that? Negative fallout of that is that you have actually very distorted the car market. A Mercedes guy actually gets a subsidy at the cost of a two-wheeler. Two-wheeler runs on petrol, but a Mercedes or a Audi or a BMW and all, they run on diesel. And they are hugely fuel inefficient. I mean, they are very, very, very low mileage. And effectively, what happens, you are actually distorting the equity structure by just encouraging this thing. So how can you kind of utilize this? I think solution is there, and many government committees have already recommended it, but obviously people like politicians and the big groups and all, they use only diesel vehicles, because the bigger capacity cars and the sports utility vehicles and all, they do not come in petrol model, they come only in diesel model. And many companies have stopped making petrol cars. Like for instance, Toyota is very disturbed with this phenomenon that 95% of the sales of cars in India are diesel cars. And they think this is something absurd. and they are actually telling government that this cannot be sustained. This is not a good idea. But again, many of the companies are obviously resisting this idea about increasing tax on the diesel vehicles. But I think you can actually promote equity by keeping diesel price low, but actually putting a high tax on the diesel cars. I'm not saying put on the buses or the trucks or railways, but put it on the diesel cars. And that should give you, I think, at least $1 billion or $2 billion. And that should be able to, at least to some extent, help you bridge your fiscal deficit, which I think is really a big need of the hour. And the second thing is about the second generation biofuels. Now this is something which is kind of very, very encouraging, but again, still, again, I just want to state an example. Waste to energy potential. According to the Ministry of Energy, potential is about 1700 megawatts, and from the urban waste, and about 1300 from the industrial waste is what actually we can have. But again, policy is not really so much in that direction, and our objective is to kind of have about 2% of the potential used in the next few years. And market analysis shows that the compound growth of 9.7% can be achieved in this sector if there are kind of sufficient encouragement which you want to do this. And there are some examples. Let me go to one example. This is the technology bit. And this is the example. Phase to energy. If you go to Delhi, there is a public transportation called DTC, Delhi Transport Corporation. They have recently done an pilot project with the Swedish government of converting the wastewater into a biogas, and they are running bus on that, and that has been very successful. Because Sweden has technology, and Sweden is partnering with the Delhi government to make it available to India, and that way they are projecting about 120 buses will be running on this biogas, and that's just a pilot project. And you can see we have a huge waste. You can see across everywhere. So that waste is something which potentially, if it gets used, it can solve both the problems. Your garbage issue can be significantly reduced, and second, your fuel will be generated, which will be environmentally friendly also. So a lot of win-win situations can happen. But again, here you require initial pilot projects, some help, and the Sweden government has been very, very helpful in this particular project. And there are some other projects that are going on in the private sector also, which are basically producing biofuels from the waste. And that basically in Kerala there is a plant going on, in Pune there is a plant working in Andhra Pradesh. These are second generation biofuels where what is the basic advantage of second generation biofuels is that it does not encroach upon your food security. So you're not using food or you're not using land. What you're using is agricultural waste, urban waste, which basically can be used to produce your biofuels. So but again, right now the technology is possibly very expensive at the experimental stage and all, but hopefully there will be kind of a lot of further improvements over the years, and I'm very hopeful that this will be a very, very viable solution which India and many other countries will be looking forward to, because this actually is a win-win situation for everybody, excepting the technology issue. Here again I'll bring another story which I read about almost 15 years back when I was completely a non-environmentalist. I was completely Keynesian, which basically means environment is nonsense. That's what I used to think. Although 50% of that I still hold, or 50% I've changed, because I'm now head of the energy management. So I'm kind of trying to become more politically correct. But I still believe at my deepest in my heart that the pollution problem is just a short-term problem. We will be able to solve it. But again, despite that, problem still exists. So how do you solve it? So one interesting story I read about, I think Switzerland at one point in '94 or something, developed a very interesting coal technology for the steam engines. It was very efficient, and that steam engine was as efficient as the diesel engine. And at that time, India was having about 3,000 steam engines. And I was hoping this technology comes to India, because that way we will be able to use this steam technology and still have the steam running in India. But obviously, as you will guess, what will happen? Switzerland was not willing to, the company which developed the technology was unwilling to sell it at a reasonable price. And obviously, Indian government decided against, because the price was too high. Then effectively, we actually closed our steam traction completely by the end of 1990. We do not have any steam engine excepting for tourist purposes here and there. There are 3,000 locomotives, which could have been very, very useful if the company, because I think if our company lost the business, India lost the huge advantage which it would have got from the coal technology. And transportation, if the steam engine is very kind of efficient, then your diesel requirement goes down significantly. But obviously, a lot of these things, I read it in Economist. I still have, I think, somewhere in my scanned copy of that paper. And I was kind of saying this is a kind of a win-win situation where everybody can benefit and huge amount of diesel requirement for India imports can be reduced significantly. But as you can guess, a lot of these things die out and then effectively are ignored again. So this is the oil prices you can see, and you can see the petrol prices are really going up, and rupee is depreciating because India has a huge deficit in the balance of trade. So how do you kind of since you do not have enough foreign exchange reserves, the direct follow-up of that is the exchange rate starts going down, which means rupee has started depreciating, and that really means your oil import cannot come down. So what happens? Because you're not able to pass on the cost to the consumers, which means your oil bill is ballooning, your balance of payment problem is becoming more serious, and a lot of people are predicting that we are almost in the 91 situation, another crisis about to happen, and then a crisis might again precipitate a lot of new developments which so far look infeasible, suddenly might become feasible, because then suddenly economics solution will start coming on the table, because so far you've been ignoring them because things have become kind of a little better, so you're kind of ignoring those issues. Now, when the crisis comes in, especially balance of payment, and you don't have foreign investment coming in sufficient quantities, then effectively what you do? Either you have to reduce your imports, which means you have to compromise your oil security because your entire nation runs on petroleum product is imported, and if you are not able to increase the prices, what will happen? Your petroleum product may not be available for the consumers. You may have to ration the oil products, like it happened in the 70s. Are we ready for that? That's something is my big worry. But again, worry is one part. Second part is when so the crisis, sometimes the seed of the new creation start. And this you can see the diesel car sales is zooming. It's really going up like anything. And petrol car sales is now this year is minus 10%. Petrol car sale has gone down. Diesel car sale has gone up. You see about 13.8%. And this is the kind of petrol price, and this you have seen it earlier. I just tried to make it simplified. Basic price is 49%, and final price actually is